Hey members, here's perhaps one of the most important videos to go along with the SAT, ACT, standardized test videos that I've been doing recently. This one concentrates on text analysis. Whereas the last video I did with the Mark Twain passage in particular, maybe some of you remember, was only a very short passage and only had 2 questions. These differ in that they're much longer and there are a lot more questions that go along with the passage, right? Now, the reason I say these are particularly important is because a lot of kids these days haven't really developed their critical thinking skills. So these questions aren't just asking the kids to answer questions about what they read. It's asking them to extract information from the text that wasn't explicitly said and answer the questions that they have for them, right? And these questions could be about anything from vocabulary to the theme of the main idea of the passage, or the tone in the author's voice and how they portray a certain person or protagonist, depending on what the passage is. So I'll go ahead and read it to you. Charles Darwin came to the Galapagos in 1835 on the Beagle. He was 26. He threw the marine iguanas as far as he could into the water. He rode the tortoises and sampled their meat. He noticed that the tortoises' carapace varied wildly from island to island, so also did forms of various mockingbirds. He made collections. 9 years later, he wrote in a letter, "I am almost convinced, quite contrary to the opinion I started with, that species are not, it is like confessing murder, immutable." Now you see that I've already put the word immutable in a box, right? I'm a big proponent of getting the kids to try to guess what the word means based on its context, right? The words around it and how it's used in a sentence. But let's say, for the sake of argument's sake, they have no idea what that word means, especially since I've only written a very small part of the passage so that I can make it more manageable to go over with you, to make a video about, right? So without further ado, let's go over to some of the questions that we have. Number 1 is asks, well, it doesn't really ask, but well, yes, it does ask. The initial portrayal of Darwin, lines 1 through 5, convey a sense of A, methodical research, B, instant commitment, C, youthful playfulness, D, lack of original thought, or E, steadiness of purpose. Well, let's go ahead and map out lines 1 through 5. They're as follows. Okay, yeah, that's it. Okay, so let's see what we do. We came to the Galapagos Islands in 1835 on the Beagle, which we can assume is a ship, right, at the age of 26. But let's look at some of the things he did. He threw marine iguanas as far as he could into the water, right? He rode tortoises and sampled their meat. When they say sample their meat, that means he ate tortoise meat. Okay, wonder how that tastes. He noticed that the tortoises carapace very well, and that's not even. We can just say that that's the end. We can end on the last finished thought of line 5, or the end of the last sentence. We don't want to only start half or look at half of the sentence here, so we don't need to worry about this part here, right? So let's go back to our answers. Methodical research. Well, when we think about what he's doing, there's really no research that he's doing in these lines, right? Research is something when you study something and then you go back and look at all the information that was written on them. And basically your purpose for research is to say something, to make some kind of hypothesis, to make a hypothesis, and then thereby researching it, prove that hypothesis, right? We don't see much of that going on here. It sounds like he's just having fun. So I guess we can go ahead and, I know we can go ahead and mark that out. Okay. Instant commitment. Well, you have to commit to something. What is he committing to? In order to commit to something, you give yourself to that thing without question, unconditionally, right? We don't see much commitment. We don't see anything being said about him starting something, right? We all know, most of us know about Charles Darwin, right, the scientist. Okay, survival of the fittest, right? The origin of species. But from what we see now, from what we read at a very tender age of 26, he's having a lot of fun, all right? So we don't really get any commitment, any sense of commitment. So go ahead and mark that out. What about youthful playfulness? Well, I mean, he's 26. Throwing iguanas has nothing to do with methodical research or any kind of commitment or lack of original thought. I think it's pretty original to throw, although maybe a little bit cruel to throw iguanas into the ocean, right? So lack of original thought means he doesn't have an original thought in his head. I would say that's pretty original, right? I don't know how many scientists have thrown iguanas into the water as a game. So we can go ahead and mark that off, right? Okay. And steadiness of purpose is the next one. Well, but really though, he's 26. He's throwing iguanas, he's riding turtles and eating them, right? Because he's curious, out of curiosity. So the closest answer we have here, based on the text, is youthful playfulness, right? He's being a kid. He's being 26, trying new things, having adventures, going wild, right? And he has the opportunity to do so, right? So, and that's what he did. Steadiness of purpose was our last one, right? To have a steadiness of purpose is kind of like um, making an instant commitment. You make a commitment, and then you have a steadiness of purpose in order to see that commitment through. We don't really see that with the information that we're given here. So we can go ahead and put C as the answer here. All right. Now this second one is where, excuse me, I walked off camera. The second one is where the vocabulary word that we don't know the definition to comes in. Right. From lines 8 to 11, we can conclude that Darwin originally viewed species as A, unchanging, B, original, C, ambiguous, D, evolutionary, or E, indistinguishable. Okay, so let's go ahead and back out 8 to 11 for 5, 6, 7. Oh, the way I wrote it, okay, I had a little trouble, right? So we can say this is 6. We'll call this one 7. Oh, wait, 7. Yeah, 7. This would be 8, 9, 10. Okay, the way I wrote it, it doesn't work out to 11 lines because I didn't write it exactly. The second part I didn't, okay. But what we're asked to do is I did write it until where I'm taking the source from to the 11th line, and that's just the rest of this. So we just have, he noticed that tortoises carapace vary wildly from island to island, so also did forms of various mockingbirds. He made collections. 9 years later, he wrote a letter, and this is key right here, to finding out what that vocabulary word is and thus getting the correct answer. Okay. 9 years later, he wrote a letter. I am almost convinced. And here we go. Here's the meat and potatoes right here. Okay. That species are not immutable. Okay. So we know that he started with an opinion that now, 9 years later, he writes that he's convinced that the opposite is true. Species are not immutable, right? So let's look at some of the words we have over here. And let's try to get some synonyms for these words, okay? Unchanging is pretty easy. We don't need to do synonym for unchanging. We just say doesn't change, okay? For original, that means first of its kind. Ambiguous means something is ambiguous. You don't know if it's left, right, up, or down. It's kind of like unknown. We can say unknown or uncertain which way it goes or what it exactly is. Evolutionary. If something is evolutionary, that means it changes over a long period of time. Change over, you say, many years. Okay. And the last one is indistinguishable, which means kind of like a little bit similar to ambiguous, where you have something you don't know what it is. It could be anything, right? Indistinguishable is kind of the same, but except it's not that you can't tell what it is and what it isn't. As in and the example with ambiguous. With indistinguishable, you have no idea what the thing is. Absolutely, it's just you can't distinguish it or separate it compared to anything else because you've never seen anything like it. It's indistinguishable from anything you've ever seen. Okay, so let's just say, yeah, you can't tell by comparison, really. Okay. Now these ambiguous and indistinguishable are kind of the same things. Okay. Something is ambiguous. It's also indistinguishable, but they don't mean exactly the same things. But they kind of complement each other, right? So as we're going back, we're talking about species, different kinds of animals, right? What do you say? From island to island, there are different forms of mockingbirds, and the carapace of the tortoise varied wildly, right? What is the carapace? The carapace is let me draw an arrow over here. It's the part of the turtle, and my art skills, you guys can see, I'm not offering art classes, and you can tell why not, because I can't draw, right? This is the carapace right here, this part, the top part of the shell. Oh, I walked off camera. The top part of the shell is the carapace, okay? So those things were different from island to island, right? So that should tell you if these things were different, if the mockingbirds were different, and the tortoise's shells were different as well, then what he originally thought was that they were not the same, or that they were unchanging, and they never changed. It was the same everywhere, okay? But no matter where he traveled, right? From the evidence that we have talking about how he noticed all these things varied wildly. Right? To vary means to be different, okay, from place to place, right? So we can say that what he originally thought, this is asking us what he originally viewed species as. So he didn't think that they were ambiguous because he knew we can't say or indistinguishable. If the answer was ambiguous or indistinguishable, then he wouldn't have been able to identify mockingbirds as mockingbirds or tortoises as tortoises. So they were distinguishable and they were not ambiguous. So we can go ahead and mark out those two choices, right? So that gives us a choice between unchanging, original, and evolutionary. Well, Charles Darwin was the person he was one of the key scientists for the origin of species. So he believed in evolution, right? That was something that he absolutely knew even before in his formative years studying, right? So we can say that evolutionary, what he originally thought, of course, it's evolutionary, right? We already know that, but that's not what this sentence from here means, right? The sentence where we talk about 9 years later, quite contrary to his original opinion, right? That is obvious that he believed in evolution. That's what he's famous for, the origin of species, right, and survival of the fittest. So what he originally thought was that the species were unchanging, that they didn't change from place to place, which was why he was so surprised and why he was reluctant to write in that letter 9 years later. It's like confessing a murder, right? Because we can tell from that, we can assume or we can infer that for him to admit that he was wrong, that was quite a task for him to do. It was something that was a little difficult for him to do. That's why he put that in parentheses in his letter, right? So then we can, from all of this information, when we analyze the text and we're given the questions, we can kind of put these things together in our head and use all of this information based on the passage and the answers, the choice of answers that were given, and use the exercise of kind of coming up with synonyms to make the answer more apparent, the most appropriate answer more apparent, right? Which is A for this one, okay? So for the original question that we had, or the original problem that we had, which was trying to define immutable, where he originally thought the species were not immutable, right? Which means what? If they are not immutable, that means they're not changing, right? They're unchanging. That they're not unchanging, right? That they don't change. Okay. So if you guys like the video, be sure to leave a comment at the bottom. Or you can contact me at jeteducate@gmail.com or shoot me a message through Facebook Messenger. Thanks, guys.